There's no doubt that the first-person shooter genre is the big moneymaker in the video game industry nowadays, and, you know, how couldn't it be? They get the biggest budgets, basically. They come out with these very nice-looking games with, you know, a very huge focus on multiplayer. That's something that kind of keeps the games going longer than, you know, they typically used to. But it's easy to see that the games are, with all they have added into them nowadays, are considerably more lacking than they used to be. I mean, you look at the 90s, you know, one of the best decades of video games, in my opinion, and all throughout it, from the early 90s all the way up to the end of the 90s, we had a huge number of innovative first-person shooters. You know, mostly on the PC. You started with Doom, you had Marathon, Quake. You know, they were the driving forces behind what made first-person shooters what they are nowadays. And on consoles, you had, you know, GoldenEye, obviously, and that helped to bring an entire genre that would, in the future, dominate the consoles to the forefront, more or less. There was, you know, first-person shooters besides that, Turok, Perfect Dark, and all of them were decent games. But the one thing that they had over the modern games, which is a term they love to use nowadays, especially in first-person shooters, is originality. You could look at a gameplay video of any of those games, which we will, and you could say, that's this game, that's that game. I can clearly tell by a split second of imagery what game that is. But nowadays, you start streaming gameplay from any of the big first-person shooter franchises outside of Halo, and unless you know from playing the game all the time online, you'd be at a loss of guesses for what this game could be. You look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then there was Battlefield Modern Combat. And, well, now the relaunch of Medal of Honor didn't have a subtitle, but the second one did. What was the subtitle? It was probably something stupid. Warfighter. Medal of Honor Warfighter. They sound very different, and they look no different. But even some of the other games, some of the games that you wouldn't expect to look like modern generic military shooter do. Science fiction first-person shooters like Killzone look a lot like Call of Duty. Massive action game, the giant first-person shooter multiplayer game for the PlayStation 3. It's a modern military first-person shooter. And I find this all incredibly confusing because Call of Duty, as you know, everyone knows, was started as a World War II franchise. And, you know, the first three games were World War II, and then World at War went back to World War II. But for the most part, it's been modern since 2007. Black Ops goes back and forth throughout history, but still, it's surprising to me that there was such, you know, an outcry, basically, from the gaming community in the first-person shooter world for a new setting. World War II had been overused, it was stagnant, and there was no need to make another first-person shooter based on a World War II scenario. But apparently the same theory doesn't hold true to modern warfare games, not just Call of Duty. Every big game looks the same, and it's you know, kind of annoying in my part, even though Black Ops 2 has been the Call of Duty that I've played online the most since Modern Warfare 2. Now, looking at them, they look no different, especially in the online. The online shares no setting similar to the story of the game, whereas in Call of Duty 2, the World War II one, not Modern Warfare 2, the campaign was World War II, and the multiplayer was World War II. Modern Warfare, campaign modern, online modern. And Black Ops, which takes place in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the new one, which takes place in the 80s and 2025. You know, they have a past and future setting in the campaign. Modern warfare in the online. Similar with, Battlefield. Battlefield 3. Everyone raved about Battlefield 3, but all it is a modern warfare multiplayer game. Granted, they have tanks and jets and jeeps, and there's much bigger maps, and there's more to do, but at the same time, they give you these gigantic maps with lots of people with jets and tanks and cars and all these things to do, and they give you a limit on the size on where you can go on the map. There was the old days where your map was so big and there was obstacles in your way that prevented you from leaving the map. So you were stuck in this small, somewhat symmetrical battlefield. But now, in Battlefield specifically, they have a gigantic, expansive map. And this may do with player numbers or game type, but regardless, they have this giant map, and if you go too far out of the way, it says, you're leaving the combat zone, return immediately. It's like, what do you mean? I'm trying to flank somebody. Why should I be forced to run down the gauntlet and get shot in the back? Which is all that happens in these games nowadays. It seems like it's time for some innovation in the first-person shooter. Now, there are first-person games that are somewhat different. We have BioShock, and that seems to be the template for the games that want to be different from the action games. You look at BioShock, which was a very story-driven first-person shooter game. They came out with a sequel a few years later that wasn't as good as the first one, but it still kept the idea of, we don't need to be running down the streets of Afghanistan to make a good first-person shooter. And that seems to be where the split is now. You have the modern shooting games, M16s ablazing, shooting Middle Easterners, but, M1 Garands shooting Nazis became completely unacceptable. So you have the military shooters, and then you have the somewhat science fiction shooters, like BioShock and the new Dishonored, which all seem to center around you shooting somebody and then also using some, dual-wielded telekinetic power coming out of your hand, which was also incorporated in the new Wolfenstein, which was a kind of a blend of the old Call of Duties and BioShock. So there's really only two first-person shooter platelets. And even the, James Bond games, which are kind of a joke ever since GoldenEye, more or less. They really only managed to hit it big once, but have still been able to maintain the brand for, 15 years. Even the James Bond games lack a big amount of stealth. Now, there's sneak past this guard, which, because the game is poorly designed, simply means walking, crouched in front of him. It's really sad, because the first-person shooter was a way to, really immerse the player in the game. Put them in the universe instead of watching somebody do all the action. They got to do the action. You got to see your little gun on the screen, and you got to do everything as the player. But now, it's just become, obviously, a yearly cash cow, which, like I said, I still fall into. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 has a fun multiplayer. It has a fun zombie mode. It's not really visually impressive. I mean, they've been basically running on the same engine with the same graphics for the last almost 7 years since Modern Warfare 1 came out. But I would like to see a return to World War II, or even just once in a while, because I think still Call of Duty 2 is the best Call of Duty game. And I don't think that setting should matter. The setting of the game should be basically the backdrop of what the story is going to be. And the story and the gameplay should be what matters. It shouldn't matter when it takes place, and it shouldn't matter, where it takes place. What should matter is how good is the game. Because clearly, World War II wasn't what was holding back the first-person shooter genre. But, I mean, granted, there were terrible first-person shooters set in World War II. But there are terrible first-person shooters set in the modern age. So why is it, and when is it, that we're going to, take another leap? When are we going to see a first-person shooter, a mainstream first-person shooter, one that will completely change the game again, set in a different time period? Even, the future games still more or less look like the modern ones, because, I mean, we're starting to catch up to when the modern warfare games took place. It's really, sad. it's time to see a new game.
Sniper identified!
I need a medic!
Enemy sniper identified!
Defy yourself!
Copy that, Alpha. Be advised, reinforcements are inbound. Repeat, reinforcements on their way. Copy that.